All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our final Teaching and Learning Roundtable of the year. We're going to have some excellent presenters today, and our topic is purpose-built spaces. And you might have noticed that we've had some remodeling, construction, and expansion taking place within ESD 112, so it's a very relevant topic. My name is Mike Nerlett, and I am the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning here at ESD 112, and along with the three executive directors, Kathy Whitlock, Jody Wall, Jeffrey Niess. Oh, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago? We decided it'd be great to get the whole division together, and people can talk about what's going on in the different departments and kind of share and maybe get some ideas, or at the very least get to know each other. So we've had some great turnout, and I appreciate you guys being here today. I just want to remind you that the session will be recorded and shared afterward. And so we have only an hour. If you have questions for any of the presenters, let's hold off until the very end, and they will take any questions that you might have. And so we're going to start it out today with Jeff Strunk, our Director of Purchasing and Facilities, and also Kathy Whitlock, Executive Director at Student and School Success. So Jeff and Kathy, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I'll go through and like Mike said, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or whatever, and we can fit them in as we have time. So this is an image of our new building down on 18th Street. That's near right across the street from that tennis facility. It's right at the south end of Stapleton Drive, and it became available, and it was kind of perfect timing for what we have going on. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is a couple inside shots. So this is, part of what we did is when there's other slides about this, but we purchased this building with just because it had a lot of opportunities, and we knew one of them was going to be to renovate some space for some of our other programs, and there'll be a few more pictures of construction as we move ahead. So there's kind of, whenever we do a move, whether it's just in the 2500 building or across campus, there's always kind of a domino effect where we'll get a new program, or we'll get a grant, and we realize now we've got space. Who's going to fill this space, and then the domino effect of who's going to take the space that's now empty until sometimes it's 3 or 4 departments, and sometimes it's just a few. So typically when a new property becomes available, that's the first thing we do is, do we need to buy the property? We're kind of always looking out for property, but do we need this property, and what could we put in there? And, you know, which programs will go in there, and then, what other programs would we have to shift? So we kind of have to think in multiple years over, we fill this building, where does everybody else go? And then kind of the order that they need to happen. And then there's other considerations when we move. When are these things going to happen? So we have a large group of facilities of employees that do various things. Some are construction and some are other things. So when we find out the kind of work that we need to do to get a space ready, we need to consider vacation. Everybody loves to take vacation in the summer, and our guys don't always get to, because that's really the best time for construction, because there's no students, and a lot of the spaces aren't being used during the summer. So we usually work our vacations around in the summer so that we can always have people there working on the projects when the spaces are empty. Then we have consideration of, is it an on-campus move or off-campus? And sometimes when it's off-campus, and this just happened, last year or the year before with a different ECE space, or we were leasing space, so we were able to get the owner of the space to make modifications um, to suit our needs so that we didn't have to do that ourselves. So if we're going off campus, do we have to do the renovations or is somebody else going to do those? And then kind of, who goes first? Who do we need to move first to make this, who's the most critical path to getting all the programs moved and open? Um, and then the timeline. Obviously, the timeline is always 99% of the timeline is always ASAP, but um, sometimes we have things that give us a little bit of time, and then we can either work around smaller jobs during holidays, or like we did with the carpet over the last few years, we used kind of an extended Fourth of July break to get those things done. And so those are kind of all considerations we have to make before we start doing any real work. And then once we kind of figure out the timeline and when we're going to do things, then we also have to have the other considerations of, is the space suitable as it is? And so 18th Street was a great example. We knew the new ECE grant, we were going to use most of the east side of the 2200 building for the ECE program. So um, Denise's program and Kevin's programs needed to move out of that building along with IT. And so Kathy and I and all of us, we took a trip down the 18th and we looked through the building and we're trying to decide who wants what space and this and that. And I think everybody will be pretty happy. Kevin's space though did require quite a bit. He has a big need for visual lines and having a really open space. And on some of the previous pictures, you could see this property, at least the suite he was going in, is really walled off, and it was hard to keep an eye on all of the people in his program. So we had to make those decisions on, he needed a lot of windows and a lot of glass so he could see everything. And so um, that's what we had to do there. Denise kind of was on the opposite edge. She wanted more, they needed more rooms and more privacy for the type of their program. And so I think it worked out really well for her. She has a pretty nice space with a lot of offices and some meeting space and some common space. And really the main thing on all these, and you'll see in the later pictures, is lighting. And so we've replaced, all of the old lighting in there, and that really makes a big difference um, for any space. And so we've been talking about, but kind of the facilities role is to kind of make these decisions. Do we need to renovate? Do we need to just paint? Do we need new carpet? Do we need to buy? Is there equipment we need to buy? So for Kevin's space, we did need to do all these things. We needed to buy windows and doors and lighting, and we had to paint. We kind of had to do really pretty much of everything for his space. Um, but now the timeline actually for the 18th building is really pretty good because there's nothing in there now, so it's open. So we can begin if they have new purchases of desks or whatever cabinetry, we can begin receiving those and installing them and putting them together. And then when the school year ends and we go to move Kevin and Denise and their equipment and their desks, at least there's already a spot for it. And so um, we don't usually get much of a timeline like this, so we've had time. So it really works out. Usually when we buy a property, we need to get it furnished as quickly as possible because Gavin doesn't want to, we don't want to pay for buildings that are empty. So it doesn't make much financial sense. So we try to get them purchased and moved in as soon as possible. Um, and then, there's always the packaging. Everybody's learned in boxing up. When we did carpet, everybody did a really great job in boxing things up and getting it ready to move. But we would keep in mind that when you're boxing things up for your moves, you'll need some boxes for items that you're going to use in the next, that you use periodically in the next week or so. And then there's some that you won't use for maybe months, and those can be packaged differently. And then we can get those out of your space as soon as possible, still giving you access to the items that you need periodically while we kind of long-term store the ones that you don't. And so once this is finished, then we move to the next space. And so again, for this one, it's a little different, but it's a good example. Once everybody's moved into 18th Street, and then we begin demo on 2200, and there's really we're not moving anybody. It's just a new space and a new program. But I don't want to talk too much about it because Heather will tell us all about that shortly. So Makoa isn't here, but I can speak on his behalf because I work really closely with IT. So in the new space that we're doing for Kevin, IT's already been involved and they knew, where network drops needed to be. Um, but sometimes we need extra power for copiers or we need cameras or those things. And obviously, when you have the walls torn down, those are the best times to wire in the walls. So we work really closely with IT to make sure, um, and they're working with the departments to make sure we know if you're going to have a conference room or you need a room with a TV or something on the wall or a projector, we need to know where those are so we can have electrical added and data added in the right spaces. So we're going through that now with our other big projects for um, the other part of the Curie building. The main part or the main part of the 18th Street building will be where Curie is going to go, and so that's a pretty major project. And so we've had to get all of the locations for cameras and data drops and all of those things. And so um, and then the day of the move again with IT, it's a lot about the computers and moving items. So usually we have time to where we can move some items and then IT can take laptops and as we move spaces and maybe in like cubicle areas or quadrants, IT can go behind and then move the computers so that some people can move. We don't have to wait till everything's moved for people to move in. We kind of try to do it um, in groups so that people can continue to work and make it, as painless as possible. But eventually it all works out, but it's, there are definitely growing pains in moving a lot of departments like this. Are these your slides, Kathy? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'm here to share a little bit more on behalf of Kevin Johnson, our Director of School Programs. So like Jeff said, this building became available. The agency was kind of determining what could potentially be housed in this building. And so in December, it was decided that one of the needs might be to vacate the building across the parking lot and move both our open doors program and our wellness and treatment services off-site to a new program. So that kicked off our little domino, which was in January, we went and met with Jeff, and Jeff described what that was like. So when we think about our open doors program, the clients for open doors are youth ages 16 to 22. And these are youth who drop in and out. They're credit deficient and they're working on getting their diploma or their GED. So there's not like a start time and an end time to the day. A lot of the students are transporting themselves. And so really thinking about that first entrance is important for them. So there was this little where the 101 is at that 18th Street. There's an entrance right there. So it's already ADA accessible and a glass entrance door. So we honed in on this one first, thinking, well, this might be the space to go. And so, one of the things when you open that door, there's a vestibule that have stairs going straight up. And so, another discussion was even though the Open Doors program will not be taking that set of stairs, we also want to make sure that youth don't have access to the stairs. So, we talked about what would that like one-way door look like? So folks could come down the stairs and push it open, kind of like what you might see at a hotel staircase. Not saying that a 17-year-old would try to just open any door and go up any stairs. I know I didn't when I was 17. But really trying to keep that safety piece in there. Jeff also talked a little bit about this wall that's taken down that kind of goes across the middle. Those were a little bit thinner rooms and they were also completely closed off walls. So when Kevin and his team walked through the space, they really talked about one of the other important things, because there is just a small number of staff in that program and there can be a large number of students in there at a given time, is really having those sight lines for those youth, age 16 to 22. So there was some great work that Jeff's team was able to do internally. Sometimes Jeff and his team have to bid out. So part of the large, complicated building that they're doing right now in some other places that might have to get contracted out, but their team was able to do this work for Kevin inside. So this is kind of what it looks like now. So with the walls up, you can see there's the doors, or you're able to see through the glass on the doors. You're also able to see into both buildings. So how the open doors program is set up, there is a portion that's done that's kind of used online, because students are all in different places when they're trying to retrieve credit or get their GED. And then there's also some small group work that happens. So there's those two spaces now with clear sight lines for everybody, as well as some office space for folks. And I think that's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff and Kathy. And again, remember that we'll have time at the end if you have any questions for any of our presenters. But next up from Early Care and Education is Heather DeGroot. And Heather is our operations manager for Early Care and Education. And she has been involved in a lot of renovation and moving and changes. And so, Heather, go ahead and take it.
Yeah, thank you for the intro, Mike, and I appreciate kind of hearing all the other very detailed work that has to go into so many programs, because ECE certainly has our fair share of very specific things. So like Mike mentioned, I'm Heather DeGroot. I'm the operations manager in early care and education, and Jody invited me to join the presentations this afternoon just to share a little bit of information about the ECE design process, and then some of the behind the scenes work that goes into kind of the whole process from beginning to end. So I'll kind of work through all of that with you today. And then if you can hang in there with me for just a few minutes, then at the end, I will share a sneak peek of our new ECE Ogden Park design that will be in the 2200 building on the ESD campus that Jeff mentioned earlier. Okay, so where the design starts. So really the design starts with kind of a bunch of regulations that we have to be mindful of with through DCYF with child care center licensing, and then also with the fire marshal regulations. So these regulations go far beyond the typical commercial building kind of requirements, and they really drive every decision from the very beginning. This really translates into very specific requirements for things like minimum indoor and outdoor space for children, staff to child ratios that influence, let's see here, sorry about that, room size and layout, dedicated spaces for routines like restrooms, hand washing, food prep, rest times, and they also require the required number of sinks and toilets based on the age group and the group size that we'll be serving. And then it's even as specific as like the placement and the proximity of those things in the classroom. So we have to be really intentional there to make sure we're meeting all those requirements. And then we also have to plan for fire marshal requirements. So that includes things like occupancy limits, clearly marked and accessible exits, fire alarm and sprinkler systems, door hardware, fencing and gate requirements, and then inspections and fire code compliance all have to be kind of considered before we even get to the next step. And then where this gets complicated, well, things get complicated because those regulations aren't always completely aligned. So sometimes we might meet the requirements for licensing for a classroom, but if we want to make any changes down the road and let's say move that classroom from preschoolers to infants and toddlers, we might not have the required number of exit doors. So we really want to make sure that we're being really intentional there from the get. So every decision, room size, layout, door placement, it all has to meet both of those requirements at the same time. And then we always try to design the floor plans for the really stricter or, kind of the highest standard of requirements that we have flexibility in how spaces are used over time. And this is really where projects can become more complicated and more complex and, of course, more costly. So we want to make sure that we get it right from the beginning. And then after all of the building requirements are met, and we've kind of got the building really set and it's ready to go, then we really try to shift gears and focus more on kind of those design functions that are going to really mean more to the folks that are actually in the space. And when we think about, why design matters, it really matters more than most people might think. Because in addition to kind of how the flow of the classroom works, it also really impacts how children and staff feel about the space. So health and safety and wellness considerations are really at the heart of all of our environmental designs. And we try to be really mindful for things like clear sight lines. I know, Kathy, you were kind of talking about that in some of your buildings. Of course, that's important for us too. Secure entry and controlled access points, noise control measures that support a calm environment, natural light and ventilation, reinforced windows with safety film that prevents shattering and also adds to safety considerations for the space, and then outdoor space designed for visibility and safe risk taking. And then spaces should also reflect how young children learn best through play, movement, and interactions. And that means creating defined areas for activities like building, reading, imaginative play, and then, of course, lots of opportunities to develop social emotional skills. It also means making materials accessible so children can make choices and build independence. And the environment should really support relationships as well. So we aim to create welcoming spaces with family-friendly features like communication boards and areas for family engagement and resources. And that will include sometimes things like clothing closets or pantries that our family support specialists support at each of our locations. And then when done well, we really like to think about the environment as the third teacher. And then, of course, space matters for staff too. So we plan for efficient flow for daily routines like arrivals, meals, and transitions. We want to have adequate storage to reduce clutter and keep spaces organized. We want to have spaces for lesson planning, meetings, and confidential conversations, and then, areas for breaks and, meal times that are outside of the classroom as well. And so the result, hopefully, at the end of the day, well-designed early learning environments are intentional and responsive to the needs of the children and families that we're serving. And then they also have the flexibility for us to be able to kind of make changes when needed as programs evolve, and spaces should be able to adapt and support ongoing growth, our changing enrollment, and allow us the most flexibility to offer different service models from year after year. So, as I mentioned, we do have the new Ogden Park building coming, hopefully in the fall of 2027. Let me see here. Just switch to. And hopefully you all can see that now. But this is going to be the new building over in the new space over in the 2200 building. So we're looking at about 7,500 square feet. We'll have 5 classrooms, and I'll kind of start showing this here. So if you are looking kind of through, this will be the north side of the building. There'll be an entrance that comes in here into a small reception room and then down through this kind of main hallway. And there's really kind of 3 main corridors. So you have the hallway kind of running vertically here, and then 2 more running horizontally through the building and then out to what will be a new playground space. The 2 of the classrooms are here, 1 here, and then 2 more down here on the south end of the building. You can see each of the rooms will have little observation rooms in them, which will allow a lot of flexibility for staff training and onboarding. We'll have a full service kitchen and a break room kind of combo down here. And then you can see here along this main hallway, lots of small spaces for offices, conferences, and then a couple of different just closets and storage space, since that's always such an important consideration. And we never seem to have enough. So hopefully that will be really helpful. And then the playground space, we're hoping to get that built out kind of, hopefully to accommodate multiple age groups, but initially will likely be for preschool, but that will run kind of off of the building here and we'll wrap around kind of to the south end of the building as well. So we'll be able to have that kind of L shape around the building and then be able to modify that as needed for multiple age groups. I think that's all I've got. Jeff, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share about the new floor plan.
I don't think so. It's really good, and just if everybody's kind of so to the left of the new floor plan, the whole big left side, that's where the current warehouse is, where like facilities and printing, just for you to a little bit to get your bearings, and the entrance where Heather mentioned, that's where Open Doors is currently. So it's yeah, this is kind of nice, and it's going to have a lot of stuff in that space, but man, it should be really nice. I hope the playground section can be as nice as the inside's going to be. So
Right. Well, thank you, Heather. Heather, what did you say that the classroom is like a teaching partner?
Yeah, we always try to think about the classroom as being the third teacher. So we have, the environment as being a really important part of that. And so we try to be, yeah, just really thoughtful when we're thinking about the space. And again, not just like doors and hardware and all of those pieces, but also having good, layout for all the different learning centers that we have to have and natural light and have it really just be a really open and bright, inviting space.
Yeah, thank you. I cannot say enough about Jeff Strunk and his team, and what they have been doing over the last several years here at ESD 112. And one of the great parts of that is staff from ECE or Specialized Student Services or SAS, when we're looking at renovations or expansion or new buildings, they can provide their feedback on what is a good classroom model for early care and education or for our therapeutic programs. And they take that input and help design or make the design to what the needs are for that, whatever that specialized program is. So before we get to Jeffrey Niess, Jeff Strunk, I just got to ask you though, when will you have that road construction done in front of the agency?
yeah, I hopefully soon. I'm not really sure why we decided to, start doing the road at the end down by 18th, in the middle of the rest of it, but that was not a great idea. So I
Yeah.
know if that was probably my doing, you wouldn't be talking to me today. So that's all I can say about that.
Yeah, that is none of your doing. All right. Well, last but certainly not least, we have our executive director of specialized student services, who, since he has come on board, has expanded greatly, both in numbers and also physical space. So, Jeffrey, go ahead and take it away.
I just want to make sure I'm expanding too, like around my waist, but that's not what we're talking about. So you can see that our comment here at the very bottom, a good space is like another good staff member, is echoes already what Heather said. And we feel the exact same way when we're building something. So it's important for us to get ahead of these spaces. And so I'm going to take the time to actually go through some drawings and how we got there. But before we do that, I'm going to say first, there we go. I usually have a lot of things right here, but I just added one thing and took everything else out. Jeff will tell you that I'm becoming a pseudo architect. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. We have an overarching mindset when we build things over here. And Josh Fritz, who's not with us today, he and I do a lot of the work on this stuff when we're working with Jeff and his team and Gavin and his team and communications later on, and certainly IT. But we start with who are we intending to serve? Because we serve, and I'll talk about the programs in a minute, but we serve different types of students with different needs. And so the spaces are unique to them, just like Heather talked about. And maybe when you're thinking about ECE, smaller settings, smaller toilets smaller, sink space. We have to think about different things, not so much about regulations, but about who we're actually serving. We're mindful of the constraints from the very beginning. So we get a space, we know what size that space is, we know that we're working within that space. Jeff will tell you too that every time we finish building a space, we're always thinking about doing another space. So I know that sometimes we're the bane of his team's existence. We plan with input from the occupants. So we do meet with our directors. So once we start our drawings and do some things, we kind of get some feedback. We get feedback from them to make sure that as we give them a working drawing and they take off to the architects and Jeff and his team take off to get, the permits and everything, we've already had eyes on. We used to do this sort of backwards. We used to say, hey, we need 3 rooms or 4 rooms. We need a staff lounge. We need and all great intention with architects. They just work like they're normally working. And then we have to figure out how to sometimes retro or change things. And much to, again, Jeff's chagrin, we'll say the door's got to be moved from here to here or something like that. So we're getting in front of that by doing these things earlier. We don't work from a fear-based mindset. So, and I say that because I think in some ways I did in the beginning when we were building one of our programs. For instance, we were required to put in water fountains with the auto pour, right? And at some point, the kids we were working with, they would actually play with that a lot. They would be stemming, they'd be stimulated by those things, and they'd play a lot. So since we couldn't remove those things, instead, I thought we'd be real clever, and we had the designers put some boxes above. We could shut those waters off, and around every fountain. When I showed the program director, thinking I was so bright, and said, "Look at all of these automatic water fountains are going to have a shutoff above, so that we don't have to worry about messes." And the director looked at me and said, "Or we can teach our kids not to play in the water." And it hadn't occurred to me. I thought we were doing this. Well, we haven't turned those off yet. They still exist above them, but we haven't used them yet because they do. They work very well with students who are developmentally compromised, but understand how to use those automatic fountains now. So we moved off of that fear-based mindset and we looked to say, okay, let's talk to our partners about what they need and don't need. Oops, going the other way. We create space that's a good staff member. We already talked about this so that it doesn't need a plan of improvement after. I don't think there's anything we built yet that Jeff's team still hasn't had to go in and we put the light switches low, we suddenly put the light switches high. We've learned different things that we're doing depending on who we're talking about and the kids that we're serving, but all the time we still end up putting our space on a plan of improvement, if you will. But I think in a sense, the better our spaces are, it is like having a really good staff member on your team. We learn from the past, we look for innovation. So we try to see what new things are going on. We visit programs. When we built some of our programs, we went to tour local programs, even some out of state, took pictures, talked to people, got their input. So a lot of the things that we get from people that are doing this already have helped us a ton in our building. And then this is the one that probably is the hardest to take, but the one I most understand. And we just have to be prepared. One of the things that Jeff and his team can't do is, in a sense, get in behind the city planners and the city approved people and push them, right? So they do their own sweet time sometimes, or they'll send back something on a drawing we have that seems inane, but it's going to delay things now for a couple more weeks. Or Jeff's trying to schedule some construction and it's got to work around when our kids are there or not there or something like that. So we push really hard to get these things completed and done so that staff can get in there, they can decorate them, we can be ready for open houses when school starts up in the fall. But we expect delays, but we prepare to be on time. What have we learned? We avoid doors at the end of hallways. Those become places where kids like to egress out. We are not allowed to lock any door. Most of the doors we have are locked from going any deeper in, so you can't move through the space and get to a classroom without supports. But at the same time, every one of those doors egresses out. They're unlocked coming out. So when you see some of our fences and things like that out back, we're trying to add just one more barrier so we can catch kids. Sometimes it's just racing and trying to get ahead of them, right? So we don't put doors where kids, when they're agitated or they're excited, that they turn and can see a door. If it's around the corner, they all know it's there, but their first thing isn't maybe flight for that door. Wider hallways. We have to make sure that, especially when we're talking with some of our kids, and I'll explain those programs, they might have two people with them at all times. So when you have three people, in a sense, a student and two people walking past another student and two people, that's essentially three people in a pod passing three people in a pod. And so we make sure our hallways are wider so that we're not causing each other any grief. We've learned this one, haven't we, Jeff, to go to single bathrooms over multi-stalled bathrooms. And some of the first programs we built, these were our biggest learning, that we'd open a bathroom that looked just like a typical bathroom, might have 3 or 4 stalls within the bathroom. But one of those just gets plugged up for sometimes, again, just a shoe goes in there. Somebody decides a toilet paper roll needs to go in there. That shuts down that whole bathroom. And so we have now designed in our program single use. So we put in so literally it has the sink, it has everything in there so that we cut down on any kids that are working right beside another kid, things like that. So you go in there, they're big enough. Some of them are big enough because they're required to be for ADA, and some of them are big enough because they're required that we might have to have assistance with bathrooming with some of our kids with motor concerns. Did we plan for staff space? We have, sometimes we forget that our staff need break rooms, places to put their lunch, locker rooms. And so we've moved, and the first place that goes as we run out of space is we start taking over offices and staff space. So we'll do that at times where we have to make sure we're planning those things ahead of time. Be nice to our facilities team, and we mean it. This is absolutely the truth. That at some point, all the people that have those programs that we are talking about today, every one of us sing the praises of facilities, and without a doubt, the most instrumental team member we have is the facilities team, because they will not only get us going, and Jeff does all the work to get maybe all the contractors in place, and we're talking about plumbing and all of that stuff that we don't do in-house. Then we have the in-house crew that we can get a hole in a wall on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Wednesday morning that hole's patched and painted, that the kids don't get the feeling that they get the power over the space, and those go away. Or we have too many holes and we put in some boards that are harder to break through. We can ask Jeff and his team, and I mean faster than we can ask that request, we end up getting those things. So anybody who's not nice, the facilities team will have to go through those of us who spoke today. IT needs to be involved from the beginning. Sometimes we forget about them, and then we got to talk about low voltage wiring. We got to talk about where the cameras go and things like that. So we've learned our lessons on that. This one I had to learn, stay on top of draft renderings. When we started doing our first drafts and we turned them over and the architects took them, and then people we weren't thinking about places that had to have like IT and had to have, where the heating and cooling systems might go and things like that. So spaces we designed, all of a sudden, by the time we're building them, I'm seeing drops or things that are put in there like, no, that's a quiet space. Why does it have an air conditioning unit? Or sorry, why does it have a heat exchanger from above? Whatever. Jeff can tell you what they are. I'm like, oh, because they needed those rooms. So we forget sometimes that we have to also make sure that the other people who need to have access to that building have a space to put their things in. So when you stay on top of them, then maybe I would have even said, okay, how about the rooms go here? Or maybe they don't, and then I can prepare a different space instead to have the rooms that I was thinking I was going to get. Carpet squares, we've learned carpet squares are good because we get stains we can't remove. We just pull up sections, and again, Jeff's team does that. There can be a bad spill that we cannot get something out. By the time we come in the morning, that whole thing looks like nothing happened. Sound mitigation, we have loud staff, we have loud students, well, maybe loud staff. And so sometimes we have to be very careful and mindful of the amount of insulation we put between, even on top of the roof, as well as ceilings, these false ceilings, as well as in the walls. Reception space, these are important. The first thing that people see when they walk in, parents, they're very nervous. They're not sure what they're getting into. Their student is no longer on their own campus. They're now going to be served in an ESD program. And so we try to make our spaces very welcoming when you walk in, and have some pictures of those. Separate entries. This is a thing we're learning now. So in the new program, that in the 1800 building that Jeff talked about a little bit earlier on, and Kathy talked about the spaces, we'll have separate entrances, and I'll tell you about that. Play spaces is important as therapeutic space. Again, we were so like thinking about therapeutic space, we forgot we run a program with children in them. So we had to go back and we've had to design both indoor and outdoor spaces for students to have access to still act and like students and have a recess and have opportunities to get rid of some of their energies. And so we've learned that we need to make sure we get play spaces and interior and exterior. Office space, again, sometimes we don't think about growth. And when we first started our program, we had one BCBA, which is a board certified behavioral analyst. We had planned for a second one. We now have 4 of them in Florence, and we're using space over in Spiro for some office space. So we have to make sure we have room to grow. And that's that part, anticipate growth. So the programs we have, the Florence Academy is the program that works with students that are developmentally compromised, very aggressive. By the time we get them, they have been unsuccessful, maybe even in another day treatment program. So these are students who are very harmful to themselves at times, harmful to other people, or to both. They're developmentally and communication compromised. If they do communicate, they're using pictures or they use augmentative electric devices. The Gorge Academy is a program up the gorge in White Salmon, where we work with students that are 1st through 8th grade. These are typically developing students, meaning they have typical cognition and typical verbal skills, but highly traumatized disabilities that might be related to anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorders, things like that. The Cure Center is exactly like Gorge Academy, and so is Quest. Cure Center is an elementary program. Next year, because of our movement into the 18th Street building that I'll show you in a second, we are moving to K 8th grade. And those, again, are typically developing typical communication, very traumatized students who have some psychiatric and psychological diagnoses, medications, things like that, very harmful to themselves or harmful to other kids. And Quest Academy, again, is the same, but it's K-12, typically developing typical communication, traumatized students with disabilities. So these programs, all 3 of these, or excuse me, these 4 programs really have to be built with physicality in mind. Do we have enough space to work with students to keep them safe, to keep our staff safe? In the Florence program, we actually have jackets that look like running jackets. If I was wearing one, it looks like just a regular running jacket, but it's Kevlar woven, it's bite proof, it's stab proof. So we've been to programs, we visited programs, Tim, Gavin, myself, Marnie, we went to Utah, we went to Kansas, and we looked at programs that were working with kids like at Florence, but they looked like they were in riot gear, and we weren't going to do that. We were not going to set up the program to have people in helmets with face masks and chest protectors. I get why that program does it. We were going to set it different. We were going to look more typical. So we have gloves if we need them. We have bite-proof sleeves if we need them. We have stocking caps for people who have longer hair that easily come off if somebody tries to grab their hair. We've gotten the safety equipment that we need, but if you walk through the program, as one of my colleagues said to me, she came up to me, she goes, "I look like Laura Croft from Tomb Raider." She had a real cool arm sleeves on, but she looked typical. We'd wear jeans and things like that. So, they've been highly successful. We have kids who needed restraint 4 or 5 times a day before we got them. We are now restraining probably 5 times a year. And that's the whole program of 23 kids. They're that successful. And the last thing I'll talk about is Spiro Center, the only program that we have I can think of on the West Coast run by public education, might even be I don't know how many in the United States there are, because most of these are run by hospital settings. But this is a program that works with kids who don't come to school because of mental health needs. And so they are sometimes our first conversations with those kids is our staff go out to meet them probably through their bedroom door. They're just leaning on either side of the bedroom door, trying to establish a relationship to get them to come to our programs so we can work through their anxieties, their fears. They may have been bullied. They may be transitioning, maybe high functioning autism. They have reasons that their mental health keeps them from attending school, but they're not violent. They sometimes are harmful towards themselves, but they're not violent. They're not aggressive. These are students that most people don't even think about. And this ESD decided that we were going to work with those kids, and it's an amazing program. So all the symbolism that we get help with from communication and things like that matters too. So Spiro is a tree growing from our stone. The Curie Center is a avalanche lily that grows through snow. You can flourish. So florens means to flourish in Latin. And Spiro means hope, and Cure means to care for. And so we build these programs with the help of communications. We get a grid right when you walk in. We're already setting up what we do and what we look like. So this is like the first drawing. So this is kind of interesting because this is 18th Street that we just talked about. This is where they were talking about earlier when they said that Open Doors was going in. When it says no work, I suppose you can giggle at that, Jeff, because you guys did tons of work in there. But what it was telling me was, Jeffrey, you can't work in there. So this was the original plot that when we bought the building. There's more over here on this end. You're able to see my arrow moving around my screen? Okay, good. So there's more over in this where we're going to put the indoor play center and stuff like that. But this area was wide open, and the bathrooms are all like we talked about. They're not single use, they're stalls. And so we decided that we were going to literally Jeff and gave me the plans, and Josh Fritz and myself walked in with a tape measure, and we started drawing, and we drew these up. This is what we needed. We needed these, we call them therapy spaces instead of classrooms. So we have 3 that we'll be starting with and a 4th that we'll get when we grow. So currently we're 2, we're moving to 3 this fall. We'll have 4. And then we have our quiet rooms where students can go into. They can choose to go into there, or sometimes they have to be escorted into there, but they're not seclusion rooms. They're not rooms where we leave kids inside of. That is still allowed in the state of Washington. It's not allowed by our practice. So we never leave anybody in here without a staff member being in there. So you'll see these office spaces, things like that. But what I want to show you is that, and I'm sorry it's written upside down, but I wanted to make the next one make sense. So maybe it's better to do it that way. But when I talked about separate entrances, once we got the plans back now from our architect, they make my red drawings look a lot better. So the things that we have now is we have a staff moves into their locker room. So their entrance is here as they come in, and they move through the building and into their space. We have where parents would walk in, and that's here. We have a beautiful entryway. We have a conference center, a lot of glass, a lot of places, so that there's a station right here where our receptionists are and things like that. So we are working to make sure that any of our colleagues, any of our partner districts, anybody who comes to visit us the first time, we look as professional as we can possibly be. This will be a space where, as we were talking about earlier, the counseling, the therapeutic counselor side, that the therapist that Kathy works with, they're upstairs right above all of this. This is their staircase going up, and there's an elevator right here. So that's their entrance, or can be their entrance. And then our students will enter over here. There's a door right here. And our students go into locker rooms. They empty out pockets. They keep their backpacks. They keep their phones in lockers that are set up here. And we have more office space, and they enter the program in this direction. You can see the bathrooms have been turned into single bathrooms so that we have the ability to keep them separate. One gets flooded, those sort of things. We have a multi-use room where we can use for indoor things and stuff like that. So we have, all the things have to create an office space for the director. We have a place for the nurse to go. All of these spaces had to be drawn in. One thing I will point out too is we use bookcases right now. They're mobile, but we're now building walls in the back. These are the fronts of the classrooms right here. And what kids really like sometimes is to be in a space where they can still do instruction, but they don't have to kind of be stimulated by each other. So you can choose to be in a desk out here, or you can choose to move your desk back here, depending on your want of being social or not social, or to be distracted. So we, in the back of our spaces right now, we'll build permanent walls for that. Then this is the new space going into Florence. We're putting in 2 brand new. So over here is already about 10,000 square feet. We're adding about another 5,000 square feet, a little over that, to put in 2 more classrooms because we're growing. So this up here would be the indoor play center. This is, if you went further up this way, you'd actually be crossing a parking lot and into the mothership of the 2500 building. So again, quiet rooms. This one's going to be a transition room. So when I first was drawing all this stuff, this is going to be a room for 18 to 22-year-olds that they transition out. So it's going to be, how do we prepare them for life after high school? This is the developmental program where these are kids with compromised intellectual abilities and communication, but we want them to be as independent as possible. So can they cook? Can they take care of their own needs? They're cleaning, they're showering, that sort of stuff. So this room will focus on that. So once Jeff sent this off, so you can see the single stall bathrooms, some staff rooms. We thought we needed a door here, and I thought I needed a door here to the rest of the storage space. And they made some changes, so we got more space. So now the door is outside and we come in this way. So this is a staff entrance for all the staff to come in into their space. We could make bigger rooms than with it. So you can see the same things we have. We didn't have to put that door up here. So we actually have a larger storage space, as Kathy pointed out, and Heather, that you need to have space to store things. So all of that was sometimes things we forgot about. So we now have storage spaces in all of them. Again, single-use bathrooms, one larger one for if we needed if somebody had a wheelchair. And again, staff space with the staff's own bathroom. Sometimes we forget about staff bathrooms and we have to either cordon one of the student ones off or we figure out other things. Now we're actually remembering to build just staff bathrooms. So these are the spaces. This is the entryway. When I talk about when you walk in, this is walking into Spiro. This would be the front door in this direction. This is the receptionist, and families will sit here sometimes waiting. We have family therapy, group times, things like that. We have partners who come in from all over to visit our programs. This is a place we can collect. This is also in Spiro. This is, you'll see that in our programs, this is a space that's more Google based, a lot more sitting areas, a lot more bean bags everywhere, things like that. This is for those high school students who are struggling to come to school. We still make sure the classrooms look like classrooms, but the spaces look a little more home-like because we're trying to be that space between their bedroom and going back to their middle or their high schools. So our space it looks and smells a little like public education, but it looks a lot more softer in terms of the colors and the community is only about 20 students in it, that sort of stuff. These are two quiet spaces. This space is in Spiro, and this space is in is in Florence, and they still look remarkably alike. We do more of the lighting and things like that, and more things on the wall that will help kids, remind them about ways that they might box breathe or calm down or find ways. Here we do things, they're touch. And so they touch things and they trace things, but we also just have soft things that they can lay down on. So when students are self-selecting this, or we might remind them they need to take a break, these are places they might go. So we share our efforts. We're currently working with 2 other ESDs and assisting the design of their own programs. So we are helping them. I've sent them our actual floor plans. I've sent them our multiple notes about how we design programs, how all the paperwork, everything we need to do, from how we help personnel with job descriptions all the way down. We're giving it to them. We partner with 4 other ESDs right now who have like programs. So we meet and we talk about how we can support each other in the development of the programs that they already have. We have 5. I think the closest one, somebody else might have 2. Most of them have 1 program. And again, 2 ESDs are having their own. So we'll have 6 of 9 will have programs probably by this fall. We get multiple visits each week. If there's one thing we've asked our staff and our students to do is get used to people coming through. We have people coming through all the time. U.S. Department of Ed has been through. OSPI was just there last week. A lot of local districts, a lot of the programs that are ESDs that are trying to build programs visit us. We have specialists, the psych group from Southwest Washington, the school psychs, they visit our programs. And we have partners like school districts and things like that. And we invite them to come through. Every one of our programs has an advisory group. So we meet with them. They are made up of superintendents or directors of special ed from our partner districts, and we get their feedback and we ask them, how can we be supporting you? What do you build? What do you need next? What kind of student are you struggling with next? We have been helping this year with a lot of legislative language, and part of that is the facilities. We've talked about what do the facilities have to have, because there was a lot of pushback against us for having light switches at a higher level. And while we do that, the lights are automatic. So the minute you you try to turn them off, you can't move. If you move, they come back on. So we had to convince OSPI that the reason we move light switches is they're just things that kids can't play with or try to tear off the wall. When they're agitated, they go after everything. We've learned not to use vinyl stencils to even name the room. We paint because they will peel off vinyl at some point. And then we get visits from our own staff here at the mothership. So at times on Wednesday afternoons, you can always come find me and we'll walk you through a program sometime. These are on your campus, and all of you at some way or another support all three of our departments. So you have space, you want to come see it. We don't have students on Wednesday afternoons. I'd love to show you. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Jeffrey. We do have a little time left for questions. Anybody have any questions? Just feel free to turn off your mic or turn on your mic and ask.
Mike, I
Oh,
was
Josh
just,
is. Sorry.
Oh, I'm
I knew that
sorry.
one. No,
Of
go
course
ahead.
that would happen. I was just going to say, Josh is here. There's nothing else in the chat, but Josh is here.
Josh, you should put on
Yeah,
your
Jeff.
camera. There it
Jeff,
is.
Josh is here.
He is my
Come
partner
on.
in crime. We are, like I said, we brought tape measures, and we, we've removed old food from refrigerators. We have
We've done it
scooted.
all.
Yeah.
For the record, I've been here the whole
Spider
time.
webs.
I would just add, we don't have axes in any of our programs, sharp or not.
Yeah, that's true.
You did a great job, Jeffrey. So,
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, this is about me being prepared and you being prepared. We spend a lot of we're learning to spend more time before we move, because otherwise we're redesigning things all the time. So the less we can ask of Jeff and his team, the better we probably feel, because they're amazing.
Well, it's so nice to be able to provide input from our educators, to our builders, and they can take those ideas, those dreams, and those best practices when it comes to facilities and make it a reality. And we're just fortunate to have that. And I don't know, I'm sure you all read the newsletter that went out this morning that Laura produces quarterly, but as other ESDs are having to cut programs, cut staff, ESD 112 continues to grow and thrive. And it's because of these types of programs and all of you that make that happen, make this growth happen. So let's give our presenters one last big round of applause. Thank you. And as I say, this is our last roundtable of the year, but be looking for more information coming out about the 26-27 edition of the T&L Roundtable. Lastly, big round of applause for my assistant, Laura Knox, who organizes this, puts it all together, and miraculously keeps me organized. So thank you. Thank you to all of you. Have a great rest of the day.